네, 미국 시카고 선물거래소와 월가 현지의 이 동향을 생생하게 전해드리는 월가 트레이더 버니의 미국 주식 시간입니다. 오늘 같은 경우는 또 미국과 시카고에서 또 이야기를 주고 계시는 재무 컨설턴트로 계시는 버니씨와 연결을 해서 미국 시장의 생생한 이야기를 또 나눠보도록 할 텐데요. 네, 첫 번째 좀 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 한국 주식시장 20대 대통령 선거를 앞서 말씀해 주신 대로 앞두고 있는데 관련주들이 좀 요동치고 있는 상황입니다. 큰 영향을 받을 것으로 예상이 되는데 월가 트레이더 버니씨와 함께 주식시장과 이 선거와의 관계와 영향을 짚어보도록 하겠습니다. 함께 보시죠.
Well, there's so many factors that affect the market, okay? And then we can take a look at the market and we can say it's cyclic, okay? Or it has cyclicality to it. In other words, it tends to do similar things over time in certain conditions. You know, when the Fed eases, the market tends to outperform. When the Fed tightens, the market doesn't outperform as much as when the Fed eases, although we've shown that the market does outperform sometimes, actually more than often. But one of the things we're in this year, this is 2022, is a midterm election year, an off-cycle election year. So our presidential elections are every 4 years. So in the middle, every 2 years after an election, and then every 4 years after that, we have midterm elections. So what we found, though, is when we go back to 1950, post-World War II, what do the returns look like in a midterm election year? So let's take a look. Now, what we've done here is I've identified the year, okay? I've identified the date of the low, okay? The pullback within that year, so the amount of price decline we saw in that midterm year, in essence 2022, the return 1 year after the low, and then I've also added our governing parties and who's leading in what. So is it a Democrat or a Republican? Is in the President's office, in the Senate, in the House of Representatives. And finally, I've said, are there exogenous factors that affect the market, global issues that are driving that year? So the Korean War, the Bay of Pigs, where the Soviet Union installed missiles into Cuba aimed at the United States, the Vietnam War, 9/11, all sorts of that. And what we want to see is let's go through each one of these years really quickly and identify what's happened and where we go out after that. Because we're going to work on the premise that there are opportunities to buy the market in a midterm election year, and we're going to prove out whether that's true or false. So 1950, we were down 14%, we rallied 31%. We have what we have this year, a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate, okay? 1954, and that, by the way, was in the Korean War. 1954, we had a great rebound year. It was all Republicans at that time. 1958, we were up, okay? 1962, we were up. We had a Democratic president, John Kennedy. We had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. What we had in 1962, we had basically, let's call it a spy plane, a U-2 plane that got taken down, U.S. plane taken down in the Soviet Union. Is a big deal. They held the pilot captive for a period of time. And on top of that, the Soviet Union brought in the missiles into Cuba that year. And so there was a lot of basically internal issues between the Soviet Union and the United States in terms of conflict. 1966 was the height of the Vietnam War. It was all Democratic, and we were 33% up that year, the following year off the low. So let's go to the next sequence. 1970, so these are all in about 15 years. So 1970, we pulled back, we were split, we still had more of the Vietnam War. you can see these rallies are fairly significant. 1978 was not. But 1978, what we had in 1978 was we had the stagflation, where we had very high unemployment and very high inflation at the same time. And so we really saw no growth. Jimmy Carter was our president. He was a one-term president. He lost to Ronald Reagan because Ronald Reagan asked people, do you think you're better off than you were when Jimmy Carter got elected than now? And it was kind of a blowout. Jimmy Carter lost, Ronald Reagan won, and they turned the presidential office basically to a Republican for the next 12 years. 1982 was the bottom of the stock market, and we had a 58% rally that year off the low, and that stock market bottomed in August of 82. 1986, we had a big rally. Let's go to the next. So you can see every year, a year out, we've had a big rally. Now what we're going to find, though, is that we had fairly significant declines. But when we go and we try and look back at what we had on this decline right here, we had the dot-com bubble, where we had inflated the value of stocks to a level significantly higher than what we've inflated the value of stocks this time. We had 9/11, and we were preparing to invade Iraq. So there was so many issues going on at that time, and I think that's one of the causes that we went down so much. But that was a great chance to make purchases down there, and we rallied fairly significantly after that. Let's go to the next clip. Okay, so 2010, we have what we had again. We were in the throes of the Afghanistan condition in basically 2011, 2010, and 2014. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea. But we still have had positive returns out 1 year and not significant negative drawdowns during this period, similar to what we have right about now. Currently, we're down 11.4%. So if we look, the average decline during a midterm election year is about 16%, a little over 16%. And the median, half of them above, half of them below, is 15%. So we are right now probably, the stock market's down, the S&P 500 is down 11.5. We're down a little bit less than the average. We may go lower. I'm not necessarily saying this is the bottom or not the bottom, but the returns out 1 year are fairly significant from the date of the low. We still don't know what the date of the low is. Right as of today, the date of the low is this week, but we don't know for sure going forward from that. But I think that the midterm election analysis has shown that since 1950, and we've had basically 70 years, every 4 years, and we've been higher, substantially higher, 1 year after the low during that period. Now, what we can also say is, since we look at a midterm election year, the low has probably been made in the first half of the year. Not always, but the low has probably been made in the first half of the year. And then the move is 1 year out from the date of that low.
네, 지금까지 이야기를 좀 들어봤습니다. 저희 노란톡 열어두고 있을 테니까 궁금하신 분들은 문자 샵 0082번으로 지금 현재 버니의 미국 주식이라고 보내주시면 함께할 수 있는 방법 안내를 해드리고 있고요. 버니의 미국 주식은 서울경제TV 유튜브에서 다시 볼 수 있다는 말씀 전달해 드리겠습니다.